All right, so in video 2, we're going to talk about how to install WordPress. So this is a little 5-step checklist that we need to go through in the next steps to successfully install WordPress and then configure WooCommerce. So remember what we said WooCommerce is. WooCommerce by itself is not its own independent, let's say, software package, right? It's built on top of WordPress. It's just a simple little script that integrates with WordPress to turn certain features of WordPress into an online shopping cart, okay? Or as some might call it, an e-commerce content management system. So step number 1, we're going to download WordPress. And step number 2, we're going to install WordPress on a server. So we are going to be self-hosting WordPress on a server. If this seems intimidating to you, don't be intimidated. We'll go over options. Okay, but WordPress is an application. Think of the application on your phone, right? This application is hosted on a server somewhere in order to retrieve information from a database somewhere. This is the same with WordPress, okay? WordPress does not work. Well, you could get WordPress to work locally on your local disk, okay? But we need a remote disk, AKA a server, in order for WordPress to work properly. And so people can visit your online store, your website. Then we're going to talk about how to install WordPress because we downloaded it. Now we need to install it. Then we're going to talk about how to install WooCommerce, and we're going to also configure WooCommerce in step number 5. We're going to use the base settings because we have videos dedicated to essential configuration settings, ideal configuration settings for most stores. So if all of this sounds like a plan, let's go ahead and get started. Now, to download WordPress, we're going to need to go to wordpress.org/download. So there are 2 versions of WordPress. There's WordPress.com, which is hosted, so essentially WordPress hosted by WordPress on WordPress servers. And then there is .org, okay, WordPress.org, which is where you have to download the application itself and then self-host it. So self-hosting means that you're going to be hosting this application on a server of your choosing. So you need a server. Okay. You can use a web hosting company for servers. There are so many web hosting companies out there, and we are, for full disclosure, I'm sure you know by now, a web hosting company, so you could use our servers. If you already have a server, however, then the prerequisite of having a server to install WordPress you have already met. So the first thing we're going to do is download WordPress. We're going to actually, in a video that will accompany this, we're going to show you how to install WordPress manually, which is the preferred method. So we're going to do this manually first, and then we're going to use a automation tool to install WordPress for us. So those are really 2 of the popular ways to install WordPress onto a server of your choosing. So let's go to wordpress.org/download, and then we're going to click on this button in the middle of the page that says download WordPress 6.0. So as you can see, I have already done that. So you're also going to need a domain in addition to the server to host the WordPress files. You're going to need a domain. So if you have a domain or you don't have a domain, buy one. You can also buy one from us. There will be links in the descriptions for our web hosting packages and also for domains. But if you already have a domain and you already have web hosting, don't worry about it. Just follow along on this tutorial. Okay, so you're also going to need a domain. So I'm going to be using a server GUI known as cPanel. So cPanel is more than likely than not, about 99% of web hosting companies use cPanel for their customers. So what cPanel does, and we'll go there now, is it looks like this, and it allows you to interface, okay, with the server without knowing command line prompts. So if you are familiar with Linux or Linux-based operating systems, then you know all about the terminal. Okay, so what the GUI does, which is cPanel, in this case, cPanel is software that's installed on the server of your web hosting company that allows you to interface with the server without doing things like command line prompts. Command line prompts require a level of expertise that you typically find with junior and senior Linux administrators. So a GUI, again, graphical user interface, that stands for, allows us to communicate with the server without using a terminal. So when we're installing WordPress manually, we need to upload the WordPress files that we just downloaded here. I'm using Chrome, the Chrome browser. So I'm going to click on File Manager. And I'm going to install this on a subdomain, okay? And I already chose a subdomain known as demo. Now, when you have a domain and you go to cPanel and you go to public HTML, you should find the domain name as a folder. It will be listed here, okay? If you have any questions about that and you can't find where your server and you can't find where the actual domain name is in the public HTML folder, this is how the public will interface with your WordPress files. Hence why it's called public HTML. And you don't see it here in public HTML. Then you can leave a question in the comments. But your domain name should be there. So I used a domain name demo. And as you can see, this space came pre-packaged with some files that we're not going to need. The only thing we want to leave here is if you see something that says htaccess, usually this file on a control panel for cPanel in the file manager, the htaccess file is usually hidden. So you wouldn't see this. So this, in my configuration setting, has been set up to show hidden files. But typically speaking, the htaccess file, which is essentially directions for how the browser should crawl your website, you'd never want to delete that, okay? So we'll leave that there, even though WordPress has its own sort of even though WordPress will write to the htaccess file. So you don't want to mess that configuration that's setting up. So I'm just going to delete these two right here. And then I am going to upload the WordPress file we just downloaded. So as you can see, this file is right here. We can just simply drag that if you're using cPanel, and this will happen. So this is about 21 megabytes. Now, keep in mind, if you have hosting and you have a control panel, look for the file manager. And it's not cPanel, by the way. Let's say you're not using a control panel that is cPanel. cPanel is the most popular one. Okay, they have a huge saturation rate. They basically dominate the market, but there are other players, like Direct Admin is one. Plesk is another popular server control panel that's used on the retail side. So in this case, by consumers like yourself, consumer web hosting, right? This small business web hosting. So those are the players in the game. But cPanel is the top control panel. So as you can see, this is telling me that in my public HTML for the domain folder, in this case, my domain name is demo, WordPress is installed. Actually, no. WordPress is not installed. WordPress has been uploaded, okay? So WordPress hasn't been installed yet. Now we need to uncompress or extract the file, okay, once it is in our folder. So we're gonna go like so, right click, and we're going to extract. Okay, now this is saying where do you want to extract the WordPress files, and we'll do it in the demo file right here. Okay, just like so. We'll close this and then we'll refresh the page. So we can reload the page and we'll see there's a WordPress folder that's created. So we're going to delete this folder here, okay, this WordPress file, because it's been uncompressed and we don't want 21 megabytes just laying around on our server space that's not being used. So the cumulative effect of not deleting these files is you end up using all of your server space, and we don't want that to happen. Now, this is very important. We don't want our users, people who visit our store, to see WordPress as a folder in our directory, right? So for instance, this says demo. So in my case, this will be demo.primusweb.com. This is a subdomain. Okay, / WordPress. Okay, it's not professional for users who put in a domain name like that to see the WordPress folder. Okay, where all our files are. So your customers are going to know you're using WordPress. Okay, and you don't want them to, you don't want to give away that information. So what we're going to do is we're going to open this folder. We're going to double click on it and open it. And then we're going to select all. Okay, this button here. Then we're going to right click and we're going to move the WordPress files into the main directory. So move it out of the folder. Okay, so when we do this, we're going to click on, once everything is selected, move, and we're simply going to remove this, okay, directory, WordPress, and then we're going to move all the files to demo. Again, any control panel is going to have an ability to do this. So we're going to hit back. Now, one very important thing we need to do is when we come back, we see the folder is empty because all of the folders have been moved to the root folder. So in this case, our demo right here, our domain. So we're going to go like so, and we're going to highlight the WordPress folder again. As you can see, it's empty. We're going to hit back and we're going to delete. Skip this, go to the trash, delete. So now WordPress is installed at the root folder of our domain, and that's what we wanted. So the next thing we need to do is let's click on the top left here to cPanel. The next thing we're going to need to do to set up our store, we need to install WordPress, right? We have WordPress on the server now, but we need to configure the database. So a database is what is going to store values. So when a customer is on the retail side of your web page and they want to do something like buy now and they check out, well, the customer's information has to be stored somewhere, right? So WordPress uses a database known as MySQL that will store all of this information. So when you're entering products, let's say you're adding products, your products with variations that have different multiple sizes, etc. All of this information needs to be stored on a database. And a database is essentially software that organizes all of this information. So MySQL is that software. So if you're using cPanel, most control panels, any control panel will have a way to navigate, to manipulate the database in the control panel. So the thing we want to do if you're using cPanel is you want to go to MySQL. This is assuming you're using cPanel, and we're going to go to MySQL databases, and we're going to create a database for our WordPress installation. Now you can name your database whatever you want, but I'm going to show you how we do it. So you're just going to type, typically the database name should be your domain name without the .com, just so that you know what database this is. So this is demo website. So I'm just going to leave that as demo. And I'm going to click on create the database, and I'm going to go back. Now there's more important things we need to do here. Okay, as you can see, this is our database. Your database is going to be highlighted here. Once you create it, make sure you create it. Okay, make sure you know when you create this database. So in this case, our database here, that it's here in the listed databases. So these are the current databases. So we're going to come here and we're going to type demo. Now for the username, I'm also going to use the same. This way, if you want the best security ever with a database, databases can be compromised by hackers. So you can use a combination of, for your username, whatever combination you want to make it a little bit more harder to guess the username. Okay, so I'm just going to put demo, and then I'm going to put my name, my username for one of my gaming accounts, right? I'm a gamer. So demo, and then this right here, make sure you, and we'll show you how to save all of this so you don't lose it. And then we're going to use a password. So with the password, It's very, very important. We want to generate a password by the system. And the reason why I say generate a password by the system, so we're just going to click on that little button here. The reason why I say generate, keep in mind this is the only time this password is given out, so you have to copy and paste it if the system generates it in cPanel. And I'm just going to call this password for DB MySQL. Now the reason why you want this to be this way is because this is going to offer you the most secure password. It's going to be hard for a hacker. Usually hackers are using these bots to guess passwords to understand this alpha sort of like numeric sequence here. So we're going to minimize the window and we're going to use this password. We're going to click on use password. Don't click this again because it will generate a new password. Okay, so use password. I have copied this. Make sure you have copied this in a safe place and we're going to use the password. Now keep in mind this is a demonstration website. So if you know what the password is, that's fine. This is just a demo website. There's not going to be any security that's been compromised with this website. Okay. If you're concerned for me. So we're going to create the user. I just clicked on create user. You don't want to, if Chrome prompts you to save this password for your database, don't save. Again, hackers can exploit that. So we added the user. We created the user. Now we have to add the user to the database. So we're going to come here and we're going to find that database. Okay. We're going to find the user. So remember we created the user right here. And then we're going to choose our database. So our database is the actual demo. Okay. So as you can see, the user, the database itself, we created demo, and then the user, okay, the user which is what we just created and added, is here. Okay. This is our user. So once we have added, once we're going to add this, once we have added that, you're going to copy this before we click on all privileges to alter create. Basically, we're allowing whatever software, in this case WordPress, to alter, create temporary tables, basically manipulate our tables for us. We're going to copy this as the username. We're going to copy this line right here before we make the changes. That's the username, and then we're going to go and we're going to copy the database name along with the password that we have stored here, right? And come here. Okay, so we have the database name and then the database username. Okay, so this is the database name and then the database username. Okay. I'm going to show you why it's important to have this information stored, because WordPress needs this when we get to the WordPress installation wizard. So now that all of that has been stored in a safe place, we're going to make the changes. And as you can see, success, you have made the changes. Now we're going to hit on this little link, go back. And that's it. Now we're going to open up another browser and you're going to enter in your domain. So I'm going to enter in the one that I'm going to use. It's a subdomain. And that should open the WordPress installation wizard. Okay. So I'm going to choose English. Notice how this doesn't have /WordPress there. It's just the domain, right? So you see how moving the files to the root domain, the root folder of the domain, is the most professional way to install WordPress. We don't want users going into separate files, separate directories, because that gives away what the website has been made by. And that's not good for just being a professional organization and also for security. So anyways, as you can see, WordPress is telling us that they need our database name, our database username, and our database password and the database host. So let's go. Let's give them what they need. So our database name is something that's completely arbitrary in terms of what you want to call it. I don't recommend calling it WordPress because, again, that is exploitative. That's something a hacker can look into to assess what type of website you're using. Okay, so we want to call this your domain. Again, you are liberal to call this whatever you want. Just don't call it WordPress. Leave it WordPress. So I'm going to call this demo_store. Okay, that's what I'm calling my database. Now you might be wondering, Eric, are you playing a trick on us? I was, and this is to keep you paying attention. So you know that this is not the database name, right? You know that the database name is here. So you're paying attention. That's good. So let's go here. Let's go to our document. And let's copy this. Premise Web Demo. That's our database name. Okay. So if you're paying attention, you would have like, what? This is one way I can get you to pay attention, right? So you're not falling asleep in these videos. And then we're going to copy this. This is the database username. Okay. Remember what our password was. We generated the password through the system. So we're going to copy our password and we're going to paste it here. Everything else, including this prefix here, we can leave the same. If you want to change the prefix, that's fine, but this is fine the way it already came pre-configured. So we have our database name, which corresponds to our database name. We have our database username, which corresponds to our database username, and we'll submit it. So again, WordPress needs a database in order to store WordPress input values. Okay, remember what we said that was. When you add a product, when a customer's on the retail side of your website and they want to purchase something, well, all of these things need to be stored on a database. Even the way you get back to the customer when they have a question about their order and the system needs to email the customer. Well, the system can only retrieve this information from a database. So this is why WordPress uses a database and why it needs a database to express some of their dynamic features, okay, that come with the software. In this case, storing values dynamically, okay. So now that it has accepted the database and now that it can connect to the database that we created on the server, WordPress is ready to run the installation. So let's click on Run the Installation. And this is important. So let's name our website. So our demo store, and more about this later, is going to be called Hawk Tennis Pro. So we're going to be creating a tennis website. More on that later. Okay, we'll call this Hawk Tennis Store. And our username, I'm just going to use my first name. Well, actually, I'll use my gamer. I'll use my gamer username. You can use whatever username you want. Some people just prefer admin. So why not? We'll use admin for simplicity. The password. Now the WordPress password, I recommend you use a strong password. And the reason why I recommend you use the strong system generated password is because it's going to make infiltrating the login page to log into the website harder for nefarious actors, we shall call them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put in some values here, WP login. And then we're gonna have a username. We're just gonna use admin. So make sure you're writing these things down, and we'll put a little colon here. And then password is going to be, now don't worry about me, this is a demo store and all of this will be changed later. Don't worry about security. I know you're seeing the password, it's okay. And we're going to put the password, the system generated password there. Then we're going to use an email address. So whatever email address you want to use your email address. This is just going to tell you that WordPress has been installed on the website. Now we're going to install WordPress. Now, one thing before we move on to the next page here is you want to make sure this is never selected, because this is going to, basically WordPress is going to instruct a search engine. So in this case, let's say, hypothetically speaking, the search engine 800-pound gorilla, right? Google, it's going to send Google a notice when Google robots.txt, which is the file that crawls websites and then indexes them on YouTube, on Google, is going to tell Google to not do that. So we don't want, or any search engine, not to do that. We don't want WordPress to be instructing a browser to do that, okay? That's gonna hurt your search engine optimization efforts. So now that all of this has been configured, we're gonna hit install WordPress, and WordPress has been successfully installed. So I'm going to save that. The WordPress login, actually I do recommend, if you're using Chrome, to save it. And then we're gonna log in, and we can log in now. You're gonna be brought to the page. Okay, the WordPress administrative dashboard. So we will take a tour of this in the next video after we go over installing WordPress automatically using cPanel automation, aka one-click install. Let's do that.